Hey everyone, Mandy here. So we all know what is on the dash of your street car. So what exactly is on the dash of a dirt modified? Well, lucky for you guys, I have Mike here and he's gonna help explain exactly what's on this thing.
As you can see, we have 5 sets of gauges. This is your tach, oil pressure, water temp, oil temp, and fuel pressure. There's various reasons that you need all of these different gauges. Your tach helps you a lot with gearing. This one here particularly gives you your low RPM and high RPM through a lap, so that you can decide what gear is going to work with your engine and the RPM range that your engine works in. Your oil pressure is probably the most important gauge that you have on the cluster. If you lose oil pressure, then your engine's going to fail. Ideally, most engines run about approximately 50 pounds of oil pressure. Some run a little lower, some run a little higher. Your oil that you run and your lines and pump all determine what that pressure is going to be. But the main thing is that when your engine's fresh and you're running a certain type of oil, it should always run that pressure. If it starts dropping, especially at higher RPMs, if it's dropping, then you've probably got a serious issue and you should probably shut it off. Over here we have water temp. The water temperature normally, I would say ideally runs around 180 to 200 degrees. If you're running too low and your engine's not warmed up, you can have problems because you don't have clearance. You don't have the correct clearances at cold temperatures that you should have. So as it warms up above 200 degrees, you want to keep an eye on it. And anything over about 235, 240, you should probably start looking to, again, shut it off or pull in. Because at that point, you're gonna push the water out and run out. These lights above oil pressure and water temperature, because they are the most important gauges. Some clusters only have these two. I prefer to run more, so you have a little more indication of what's going on in your engine. But these lights will come on. The oil pressure light will come on if it drops usually below 18 PSI. The oil pressure light will come on. And at that point, you can watch it. And if it gets below 10 or goes to 0, you really got an issue. Your water temperature, that light, you can get different senders, but I usually set mine at 230 or 235. That way that light will come on and give you an indication that your radiator's probably plugged full of dirt or you have a water hose blown. It's another good idea. It's a good tool to have is a water pressure sender. Because sometimes if you blow a water line, you can run out of water, and then you'll still read a normal temperature when there's no water in the system. But you want to be able to know that there's no water in there, and you're going to have an issue. Down here, we have oil temperature. The oil temp usually runs 80 degrees hotter than the water. If it's way below or way above that, you can tell that you have an oil system issue rather than a water system issue if your temperatures are climbing. So it's good to have both of those so that you can determine where your temperature issues are coming from. Your fuel pressure gauge, depending on what pump, what needle and seats in your carburetor, things like that, is going to determine what fuel pressure you should run. The big thing is if it drops completely, you're running out of fuel probably. But you can also tell if you have a regulator or things like that, you can tell if the fuel pressure is fluctuating. If you run a regulator, your fuel pressure should be dead on no matter what RPM you're at, unless it's the type that has a bleed in it, which would run lower pressure at idle, and then it would climb to the determined pressure you set the regulator at, and it should stay there throughout the rest of the RPM band. So there's a little bit about the gauge cluster in a dirt modified. Over here we have an alternator light. That's to tell you if you're getting voltage from your alternator to charge the battery. It's very important to have voltage coming from the alternator to have power going to your MSD box if you run an electronic ignition. If you're running a magneto, it's not so much important. You also have an accessory switch. Some people hook those up to your helmet blower. Other people hook them up to your lights for your gauges, things like that. And then you got your starter button and your ignition. Generally, we like to push the starter button for a little while until we get oil pressure, and then flip the ignition switch on to fire it. Over here we have a battery on off switch. This goes to the hot side of the battery and can disconnect it in case the driver's unable to function in an accident. Safety crew can shut that off to kill all the power to all the ignition and everything for safety reasons.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope you learned a few new things that you didn't know already. As usual, thank you for watching. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the newsletter, and come back next time.